I never imagined my own son would relegate me to the basement of my own home. The home I'd paid for. The home where I'd raised him with everything he could ever need. When I lost my executive position after 30 years, I thought family would be my safety net. Instead, my son and his wife saw me as nothing but a burden, an old woman who'd outlived her usefulness. They never bothered to ask about my finances. They never wondered why I seemed so calm, despite losing my income. They were too busy dividing up my belongings, claiming my spaces, and telling me how fortunate I was that they were willing to take me in. But what they didn't realize was that I had a $3 million insurance policy that my late husband had set up decades ago. A policy I never told them about. A policy that would change everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I remember the exact moment my world shifted. It was a Tuesday, afternoon in October, the kind of crisp autumn day where the Portland air smells like fallen leaves and possibility. For 30 years, I'd walked through the glass doors of Cascade Marketing Group as their chief brand officer. My office overlooked the Willamette River, and I'd spent countless mornings watching the city come alive while preparing for board meetings or finalizing campaign strategies. That office was more than just a workplace. It was a second home filled with memories, achievements, and the comfortable certainty of knowing exactly who I was and what I was worth. "Maggie, do you have a minute?" Robert Keller, the CEO, stood in my doorway, his expression unreadable. "Let's talk in the conference room." I followed him, noticing the HR director already seated at the table, a folder placed neatly in front of her. That's when I knew. The merger we'd been hearing rumors about for months was happening, and at 62, I was an expensive line item easily erased from the new company's budget. "You've been the backbone of this company's success," Robert said, his voice carefully measured, which makes this conversation even harder. I listened as they explained the restructuring, the consolidation of senior positions, the generous severance package. Words designed to soften the blow of being discarded after 3 decades of loyalty. I nodded, asked appropriate questions, and signed the necessary paperwork with a steady hand. I even smiled and assured them I understood business decisions weren't personal. But as I packed my office that afternoon, removing family photos, awards, and the small jade plant I'd kept alive for 15 years, the reality washed over me. At 62, in an industry that worshipped youth and innovation, my career had effectively ended. Not with the bang of a triumphant retirement party, but with the whisper of corporate euphemisms. I drove home in a daze, parking in the driveway of the 4-bedroom Tudor house in Lake Oswego that I'd bought after my husband Richard passed away 7 years earlier. It was too big for just me, but I'd kept it because it was close to my son Mark and his family. Close to my grandchildren, Tyler and Emma, who I adored beyond measure. Inside, I poured myself a generous glass of Cabernet and called my daughter, Jessica. Unlike her older brother Mark, who had followed in Richard's footsteps to become an investment banker, Jessica had chosen a different path. She taught 3rd grade at a public school across town, lived in a modest bungalow with her husband, Daniel, and had always possessed a sensitivity that her brother lacked. "Mom, they're idiots," Jessica declared after I explained what had happened. "You built that company's entire brand identity." "It's business, honey," I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "Companies merge, roles become redundant. I've been on the other side of these decisions before. But after 30 years, they couldn't let you retire on your own terms." Her indignation warmed me, even as I tried to downplay my own shock. "The severance is fair," I explained, "and your father's life insurance policy matured years ago. I'll be fine financially." What I didn't mention was just how fine I would be. Richard had been meticulous about planning for our future. The insurance policy he'd set up was substantial, $3 million, and I'd invested it wisely over the years since his passing. It's not about the money, Mom. It's about respect. 30 years counts for something. Not in business, I sighed. Not anymore. We talked a while longer, Jessica insisting I come for dinner that weekend, promising that Daniel would grill those salmon fillets I loved. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen, surrounded by the settling silence, and made a decision. I wouldn't tell Mark about losing my job right away. Not because I was ashamed, but because I knew my son. He would immediately see me as diminished, no longer the capable executive mother, but an aging woman in need of assistance. Mark had a particular vision of success and status, one I'd always fit neatly into. Until now. Instead, I spent the next few days updating my resume, reaching out to industry contacts and scheduling lunches with former colleagues. I wasn't naive. I knew finding a comparable position at my age would be nearly impossible. But I needed to go through the motions, to remind myself that I still had value beyond my job title. It was during lunch with Linda Patel, my former creative director who had left years earlier to start her own consulting firm, that the path forward began to clarify. "You should consult," Linda said, stirring her iced tea. We were seated at a corner table at Riverside Roasters, watching rain streak down the windows. "Your Rolodex alone is worth 6 figures a year." "I don't know," I hesitated. "Starting over at my age." Linda laughed, the sound sharp and genuine. "Maggie Davis, afraid of starting over? The woman who revitalized an entire company brand? At 45? The one who launched 3 successful sub-brands in a down economy?" Her confidence in me felt like a lifeline. "It's different now. The industry has changed." "People still need guidance from someone who's seen it all," Linda said. "Look, come work with me on the Weston project. They need a strategic vision, and you're the best strategic thinker I know." I left that lunch with something I hadn't felt since cleaning out my office. Purpose. The possibility of consulting, setting my own hours, choosing projects that excited me, began to take shape. In my mind, I wouldn't have the same salary, but with my savings and Richard's insurance policy, I didn't need to. That evening, I finally called Mark. Unlike my conversation with Jessica, this call was brief and focused. "The company merged, and my position has been eliminated," I explained, keeping my voice matter of fact. There was a pause on the line before Mark responded. "Just like that? After all these years?" "That's business," I echoed the words I'd said to Jessica. "I'm looking at consulting opportunities." Another pause. "At your age? Mom, be realistic." There it was, the judgment I'd anticipated. "I'm 62, Mark, not 82. And I have plenty of industry contacts." "Sure. But companies want fresh perspectives now. Digital natives. Not—" He stopped himself. "Not someone like me?" I finished for him. "I didn't mean it like that. I just think you should consider your options carefully. Maybe it's time to think about downsizing, simplifying your life. That house is too big for one person anyway." The conversation shifted then, Mark suggesting I come for dinner that weekend to discuss options. I agreed, though a sense of unease had settled in my stomach. When I hung up, I sat in my living room looking around at the home I'd created. Mark was right about one thing. The house was too large for just me. But the idea of downsizing felt like another loss, another piece of my identity stripped away. Saturday evening arrived, and I drove the familiar route to Mark and Vanessa's West Hills home, a sprawling contemporary structure with floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist landscaping. Their house always reminded me of an architectural magazine. Spread, impressive but untouchable, as though actual living might disrupt its perfect aesthetic. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Mark answered the door in casual designer clothes that probably cost more than most people's formal wear. Mom, come in. Vanessa's just finishing up dinner. I kissed his cheek, noting how he stepped back slightly, always maintaining a certain distance. Inside, my grandchildren were nowhere to be seen. Where are Tyler and Emma? I asked, following him into the kitchen where Vanessa stood arranging endive leaves on a platter. They're at a sleepover, Vanessa replied without looking up. We thought it would be better to have an adult conversation without distractions. The phrasing struck me as odd. My grandchildren weren't distractions to me, but I smiled and offered the bottle of wine I'd brought. Vanessa examined the label with a slight frown before placing it aside, already having opened one of their own selection. Dinner was a carefully orchestrated affair, locally sourced vegetables, wild caught, fish, and a grain I couldn't identify. The conversation remained superficial through the first course. Neighborhood news, an upcoming charity gala Vanessa was helping organize, Mark's recent business trip to Singapore. It wasn't until Vanessa cleared the main course that Mark leaned forward, his expression shifting to what I recognized as his business face. Mom, Vanessa and I have been talking, he began, about your situation. My situation? I echoed, taking a deliberate sip of water. Losing your job at your age is serious. The job market isn't kind to experienced professionals. I noticed the hesitation, the careful avoidance of the word older. I'm exploring consulting, I said. Linda Patel has already offered me a project. Mark and Vanessa exchanged glances. That's a nice gesture from your friend, Vanessa said with a thin smile, but consulting isn't stable income, and maintaining that house with property taxes in Lake Oswego. We think you should sell, Mark stated flatly. The market is strong right now. You could get a good price, downsize to something more. Appropriate. Appropriate? I repeated. Manageable, Vanessa clarified. Something easier for someone in your position to handle. The conversation was unfolding exactly as I'd anticipated, yet it still stung. They saw me as diminished, incapable. I appreciate your concern, I said carefully. But I'm not rushing into any decisions. The severance package is generous, and I have savings. Mark frowned. Savings won't last forever, Mom. And what about healthcare costs? Long-term care? Have you thought about those things? I had, of course. The insurance policy Richard had left would more than cover such expenses. But I'd kept the details of our finances private, even from our children. It wasn't that I didn't trust them, but Richard and I had always believed financial independence was important. I've planned for retirement, I assured him. Just not quite this soon. Plans change, Vanessa interjected. And that's why we wanted to talk to you? She glanced at Mark, who nodded for her to continue. We think you should move in here with us. The offer hung in the air, completely unexpected. I looked between them, searching for genuine warmth, the kind of concern that would make such an offer touching rather than alarming. That's very generous, I managed, but I value my independence. Independence is wonderful until something happens, Mark said. What if you fall? What if you get sick? Living alone at your age isn't practical. People my age live alone all over the world, Mark, I responded, unable to keep a slight edge from my voice. I'm healthy, active, and perfectly capable. For now, Vanessa said quietly, but that can change quickly. As they continued outlining their proposal, the true nature of the offer became clearer. Yes, I would move in with them, into the basement that they'd converted into a mother-in-law suite years ago, but had mostly used for storage. Yes, I would sell my house, and they had helpful suggestions about where those proceeds might go, including college funds for the grandchildren and renovations to make the basement more comfortable. We could list your house next week, Vanessa was saying, her interior designer instincts already calculating how quickly my home could be staged and sold. Our realtor friend Jana could handle everything. And we know a great estate sale service for furnishings you won't need, Mark added. They're very efficient. They were dismantling my life before I'd even agreed to anything. The presumption was breathtaking. This is a lot to process, I said finally. I need time to think. Mark's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. We're trying to help you, Mom. There's no need to be stubborn about this. It's not stubbornness to want time to consider major life changes, I replied. I appreciate the offer, but I won't be rushed into a decision. The evening concluded with strained politeness, promises to talk more soon, and a hug from Mark that felt perfunctory at best. As I drove home through the October darkness, a cold clarity settled over me. My children had responded to my job, loss in ways that revealed their true characters. Jessica with empathy and indignation on my behalf, Mark with calculation and a swift determination to take control. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and began making lists. Financial assets, personal belongings I couldn't part with, places I might want to live, options I hadn't considered. And somewhere around midnight, I made a decision. I would tell Mark about the insurance policy, explain that I was financially secure, and politely decline his offer to move into his basement. The next morning, I called him. I've been thinking about your offer, I began. Good, he interrupted. I've already spoken to Jana about listing your house. She can come by tomorrow to take measurements and photos. The presumption stunned me into momentary silence. Mark, I haven't agreed to anything yet, I said when I found my voice. And before we discuss this further, there's something you should know about my financial situation. Mom, whatever savings you have won't last. The average retirement can cost. I have a $3 million insurance policy, I stated flatly. Your father set it up years ago. With my investments in Severance, I'm more than comfortable financially. The silence on the line stretched so long I thought we might have been disconnected. $3 million? He finally asked, his voice unnaturally high. Why haven't you ever mentioned this? It was a fair question, though his tone suggested less confusion and more accusation. Your father and I always kept our finances private. It wasn't relevant until now. Not relevant? Mark's voice rose. Mom, we've been worried sick about your future. We've been making plans, rearranging our lives to accommodate you. I've been retired less than a week, I pointed out. And you never asked about my financial situation before suggesting I move into your basement. Another long pause. So, you're not selling the house? He finally asked. Actually, I am, I said. You're right that it's too big for one person, but I'll be purchasing a condo downtown, not moving into your basement. Downtown? He sounded genuinely confused, as though the concept of his mother choosing an urban lifestyle was incomprehensible. That's not safe for someone your age. I'm looking at secured buildings with doormen, I explained, and I want to be closer. To the cultural district, museums, theaters, restaurants. This is unexpected, Mark said, his voice cooling. We really thought we were helping you. I know, I said, softening my tone. And I appreciate the intention. But I need to make my own decisions about the next chapter of my life. The conversation ended awkwardly, with Mark promising to process this new information and get back to me. I hung up feeling both relieved and unsettled. I'd planned to maintain my independence, but I hadn't anticipated the strain it would place on my relationship with my son. 2 days later, when I hadn't heard back from Mark, I received an unexpected call from Vanessa. Maggie, she began, her voice honeyed in a way that immediately put me on guard. Mark told me about your financial situation. That's wonderful. News! But we still think our offer makes sense. I appreciate that, Vanessa, but I've decided— Just hear me out, she interrupted. The basement apartment would give you proximity to Tyler and Emma. You could see them every day, be part of their daily lives in these formative years. Isn't that worth considering? The manipulation was obvious, but effective. My grandchildren were my soft spot, and Vanessa knew it. Of course I want to be close to them, I acknowledged. But I can do that without living in your basement. It wouldn't be like living in a basement, she countered. It's a fully finished space. We'd update it, make it beautiful. I'd personally oversee the renovations. I'm sure you would, I said, unable to keep a slight edge from my voice. But I've made my decision. Vanessa's tone shifted then, the honey crystallizing into something harder. Mark and I have already discussed this extensively. He's very hurt that you'd turned down our offer, especially after all we've done for you. I blinked, genuinely confused. All you've done for me? Emotional support, including you in family events, making sure you're not alone during holidays. It was a stunning reframing of normal family relationships, as though they were special accommodations. Those are things families typically do for each other, I said carefully. Not everyone would be so accommodating, Vanessa continued as if I hadn't spoken. Many people your age end up quite isolated. We're offering you integration into our daily lives, and you're choosing a condo downtown over your own family. The conversation deteriorated from there, with Vanessa becoming increasingly transparent about their true motivation: my money. Though she never directly mentioned the insurance policy, her references to family financial planning and securing the children's future were obvious allusions. By the time I hung up, my decision was cemented. Not only would I not be moving into their basement, but I would also be reevaluating how much time I spent with Mark and Vanessa altogether. My grandchildren remained my priority, but I would find ways to maintain that relationship without subjecting myself to Mark and Vanessa's manipulations. The following week unfolded in a whirlwind of activity. I listed my house with a different realtor than the one Mark had suggested, began looking at condos in the Pearl District downtown, and accepted Linda's offer to consult on the Weston project. I also made a point of having Emma and Tyler over for a grandma sleepover, wanting to strengthen my direct relationship with them independent of their parents. It was during this sleepover, while making pancakes on Saturday morning, that Emma asked the question that broke my heart. "Grandma, why don't you want to live with us? Daddy said you chose strangers downtown over your own family." I sat down the spatula and knelt to her level, meeting her confused 9-year-old eyes. "That's not true, sweetheart. I love you and Tyler more than anything in the world. But Grandma needs her own space, just like you need your own bedroom." "But Daddy fixed up the basement for you," Tyler chimed in from the table. "He said it would be perfect for old people because there aren't many stairs." The casual cruelty of children repeating adult conversations never ceased to amaze me. "The basement is very nice," I said carefully, "but Grandma wants a place with lots of windows and light. And I'll be close enough that we can still have sleepovers and special outings." The children seemed satisfied with this explanation, but their innocent questions revealed how Mark and Vanessa were characterizing my decision to their children, and likely to others in our social circle. I was being painted as the ungrateful, selfish mother who chose luxury over family. The reality couldn't have been further from the truth. The downtown condo I eventually selected was smaller and less expensive than several options I'd considered, chosen specifically for its proximity to parks and child-friendly attractions that would make visits with my grandchildren enjoyable. I'd also set up a significant trust for their education, though I'd decided not to inform Mark and Vanessa of this yet. The real estate market was indeed strong, and my Lake Oswego home sold within 2 weeks, well above asking price. As I began the process of sorting through 30 years of accumulated possessions, deciding what to keep and what to let go, Jessica came over to help. "Have you heard from Mark?" she asked, carefully wrapping a crystal vase in newspaper. "Not directly. I admitted. He's been communicating through the children. Jessica's expression darkened. That's manipulative and unfair to them. It's not ideal, I agreed. But they're young enough that they don't fully understand what's happening. And what is happening, Mom? Jessica set down the wrapped vase and faced me directly. Because from my perspective, my brother is having some kind of bizarre meltdown over you exercising your independence. I hesitated, unsure how much to share about the financial aspects of the situation. Jessica had never been motivated by money the way Mark was, but I'd kept the insurance policy private for so long that revealing it now felt complicated. Your brother and Vanessa had certain expectations about my retirement, I said carefully. They assumed I would need their financial support and were planning accordingly. Jessica's eyes narrowed. You don't need financial support though, do you? Dad left you well taken care of. The perceptiveness of my daughter sometimes caught me off guard. Yes, I acknowledged. Very well taken care of. And Mark is upset because I didn't share that information with him immediately, and because I declined their offer to move into their basement. Jessica snorted. Their basement? They wanted to put you in the basement? The one with those tiny windows and the persistent mildew smell? They offered to renovate, I said, unable to keep a wry smile from my face. How generous, Jessica rolled her eyes. Look, Mom, I know Mark is my brother and I love him, but he's always been calculating. If he's upset, it's not because he's concerned about you. It's because his plans got disrupted. Her assessment was harsh but accurate. And while I wanted to protect both my children from the uglier aspects of this situation, I also recognized that Jessica was an adult who could handle the truth. Your father left me a $3 million insurance policy, I said quietly. I've invested it well over the years. Between that, my severance, and the house sale, I'm more than comfortable. Jessica's eyes widened, but only briefly. Then she nodded. Good. You deserve security after working so hard for so long. She paused, then added, Did Mark know about this before you lost your job? No. Neither of you did. Your father and I always kept our finances private. But you told Mark recently? Yes, when he was insisting I needed to sell my house and move into his basement for financial reasons. Jessica was quiet for a moment, processing. And now he's not speaking to you directly. That's right. Because you're not financially dependent on him as he expected. I hesitated. I think it's more complicated than that. Is it, though? Jessica pressed. Because it sounds like he had plans for your money that you disrupted by being self-sufficient. The conversation was veering into territory that made me uncomfortable, painting Mark as purely mercenary. Despite everything, he was still my son, and I wanted to believe his motivations weren't entirely self-serving. Mark and Vanessa have always been planners, I said diplomatically. They like to control situations, anticipate outcomes. My sudden job loss and subsequent decisions didn't align with their vision. Jessica looked skeptical but didn't push further. We returned to sorting and packing, the afternoon passing in comfortable conversation about less fraught topics. Jessica's students, Daniel's recent promotion, places downtown they might like to visit once I was settled in my new condo. It was, only as she was leaving, arms full of family photo albums I'd set aside for her to digitize, that she paused at the door. Mom, promise me something? What's that? Don't let Mark make you feel guilty for living your life on your terms. You've earned this next chapter, whatever it looks like. I hugged her awkwardly around the stack of albums. I promise. As October gave way to November, the temperatures dropped, and the Pacific Northwest settled into its characteristic chilly rains. My house continued to empty as I sold furniture that wouldn't fit in the condo, donated countless boxes to charity, and carefully distributed family heirlooms between my children, with Jessica acting as proxy for Mark, who still wasn't speaking to me directly. It was during this liminal period, no longer fully in my old life but not yet established in my new one, that the situation with Mark escalated in an unexpected way. I had agreed to watch Emma and Tyler after school one Friday while Mark and Vanessa attended a work function. The children and I had a wonderful afternoon baking cookies, playing board games, and watching a movie. At 6:30, I started gathering their belongings, expecting their parents soon. By 7:30, with no word from Mark or Vanessa, I called both their cell phones. No answer. I texted. No response. At 8:00, Emma started asking when her parents would come. I assured her they were probably just running late. By 9 a.m., with the children growing increasingly tired and anxious, I decided to drive them home myself. I loaded them into my car, drove to Mark and Vanessa's house, and used the emergency key they'd given me years ago to let us in. The house was dark and empty. I settled the children into their bedrooms, read them stories until they fell asleep, and then went downstairs to wait in the living room, growing increasingly concerned and irritated. It was nearly midnight when I heard a car in the driveway. Moments later, Mark and Vanessa stumbled in, clearly intoxicated, laughing about something until they spotted me sitting in their living room. "Mom." Mark froze. "What are you doing?" "Here?" "Waiting for you," I said, keeping my voice low to avoid waking the children. "You were supposed to pick up Emma and Tyler at 6:30. Vanessa's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh God, that was tonight? I thought that was tomorrow." "You didn't get my calls? My texts?" Mark pulled out his phone, squinting at the screen. "Battery? Died," he muttered. "Mine too," Vanessa added, not bothering to check. I stood, gathering my purse and coat. The children were worried. I told them you were just running late. "Mom, I'm sorry," Mark began, but his apology sounded perfunctory. "Things have been so hectic lately." "Too hectic to remember your children?" The words came out sharper than I intended. Vanessa's expression hardened. "That's not fair. We made one mistake." "One that left your children waiting for hours, wondering where you were," I countered. "I'm not judging you for having a night out. I'm concerned that neither of you bothered to check your messages or remember your commitment." Mark's face flushed. Whether from alcohol or anger, I couldn't tell. "We don't need parenting advice. From someone who's choosing to move downtown to be closer to wine bars than her own grandchildren." The accusation stung, so patently unfair that for a moment I couldn't respond. "That's not why I'm moving downtown, and you know it," I said finally. "I'm moving to a secure building with elevators and amenities appropriate for someone my age, while remaining close enough to maintain regular contact with Emma and Tyler." "Regular contact isn't the same as being here," Vanessa interjected. "If you really cared about them, you'd want to be part of their daily lives. The way you were tonight?" I retorted, immediately regretting the low blow. Mark stepped forward, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "You think you're so self-sufficient with your insurance money? So independent. But when you're alone, in that sterile condo, while we're here making memories as a family, you'll regret this choice." I took a deep breath, determined not to let his cutting words affect me. This isn't about being alone versus being with family. It's about respecting my choices and independence. "Independence," Vanessa scoffed, kicking off her heels. Such a convenient excuse for selfishness. It was late, I was tired, and this conversation was rapidly deteriorating. "We'll discuss this when you're both sober," I said, moving toward the door. "The children are asleep. I'll call tomorrow to check on them." As I reached for the doorknob, Mark's voice stopped me. "This could have been so different, Mom. We could have been a real family, supporting each other. Instead, you're choosing to abandon us." The manipulation was so transparent it would have been laughable if it weren't so painful. "I'm not abandoning anyone, Mark. I'm 62 years old and making my own housing decisions. That's all. I left before he could respond, driving home through the quiet Portland streets, my mind racing. The incident confirmed what I'd suspected. Mark and Vanessa's offer had never been about caring for me in my time of need. It had been about control of my assets, my life decisions, and ultimately, my money. The next morning, I woke to a flurry of text messages from Jessica. "Call me ASAP. Mark just called Daniel ranting about last night." I called her immediately, bracing myself. "Mom?" Jessica's voice was tense. "What happened last night?" I explained the situation, my babysitting, their forgotten commitment, the midnight confrontation. "And he had the nerve to accuse you of abandoning the family?" Jessica's indignation vibrated through the phone. While he was out getting drunk and forgetting his own children? "He's upset about more than just last night," I sighed. "This is about the insurance money and my decision not to move in with them." "Daniel and I can't believe how he's acting," Jessica continued. "He called at 7 this morning to tell us you'd interfered in his parenting and ambushed them when they came home." The rewriting of reality was breathtaking. "Jessica, I was there because they asked me to watch the children and then didn't show up or answer their phones." "I know, Mom. We know." Her voice softened. "Mark's always been good at spinning narratives that make him the victim." We talked a while longer, Jessica reassuring me that she and Daniel saw the situation clearly. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by half-packed boxes, and considered how quickly family dynamics could shift. In just a few weeks, I'd gone from respected matriarch to villain in Mark's story, all because I'd refused to play the role he'd assigned me. The closing date for my house sale was approaching, and I needed to finalize the purchase of my downtown condo. I spent the morning on calls with my realtor, my lawyer, and the moving company, arranging the logistics of my transition. It felt good to focus on practical matters, to make decisions about my future that had nothing to do with Mark's expectations. That afternoon, Raymond Chen, my late husband's friend and our longtime insurance agent, came by to help me review some paperwork related to the policy. Raymond had been the one to suggest the substantial life insurance plan to Richard decades ago, a decision that had provided me with security I'd never anticipated needing so soon. "Richard would be proud of how you've managed," Raymond said, seated at my dining room table. "Not just the financial aspects, but how you're handling this transition." "I'm not sure about that," I admitted. "The situation with Mark has become complicated." Raymond nodded sympathetically. "Adult children often struggle when parental roles shift. Richard and I discussed this possibility years ago." "You did?" This was news to me. He worried that Mark especially might have certain expectations about inheritance, family resources. Raymond adjusted his glasses. Richard noticed his materialistic tendencies even then. The observation stung, though it wasn't surprising. Richard had always been perceptive about our children's personalities, recognizing Jessica's empathy and Mark's ambition from an early age. "Richard believed strongly in your independence," Raymond continued. "That's why he structured the policy as he did, directly to you. No conditions, no oversight from the children." "A decision Mark is currently unhappy about," I said wryly. Raymond's expression grew serious. "Maggie, I don't mean to overstep, but I've seen many families fracture over money. If Mark is already displaying concerning behavior, you might want to consider additional protections." "What kind of protections?" "Legal documentation of your wishes, medical directives that name Jessica rather than Mark. Perhaps a trust for the grandchildren that Mark and Vanessa can't access directly." His suggestions made practical sense, but implementing them felt like an acknowledgement that my relationship with my son had fundamentally changed, that I no longer trusted him to respect my wishes or act in my best interest. "I'll think about it," I promised Raymond as he gathered his papers to leave. After he departed, I stood at my living room window, looking out at the garden Richard and I had planted together years ago. The Japanese maple he'd insisted on was ablaze with autumn color, its leaves a fierce red against the gray November sky. He had planted it knowing he wouldn't see it reach maturity, an act of faith in a future he wouldn't share. I wondered what advice he would give me now about our son, about this unexpected chapter of my life. The doorbell interrupted my thoughts. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment, I hoped it might be Mark coming to apologize. Instead, I found Tyler and Emma on my doorstep, accompanied by Daniel, Jessica's husband. "Surprise visit," Daniel explained with an apologetic smile. "Jessica thought you might need some grandkid time." The children rushed past me into the house. Emma immediately heading for the tin of cookies I always kept in the pantry, Tyler making a beeline for the chess set in the living room. "Is everything okay?" I asked Daniel quietly as the children disappeared inside. "Mark dropped them off at our place this morning," he explained. "Said he and Vanessa needed recovery time from last night. Jessica thought they might as well spend the day with you since they've been asking about you all week." The orchestration of this visit, Mark dropping the children with Jessica rather than calling me directly, Jessica and Daniel facilitating time with my grandchildren, highlighted how strained the family dynamics had become. But as Emma returned, cookie in hand, her small fingers threading through mine to pull me toward the kitchen for proper tea, I pushed those concerns aside. The children, at least, remained untouched by the adult tension swirling around them. We spent a delightful afternoon together. I taught Emma how to make my special cinnamon rolls while Tyler set up an elaborate chess tournament, insisting that each of us compete. Daniel, who had initially planned to drop the children off and leave, ended up staying, his easy warmth and genuine interest in the children's activities a welcome presence. As the afternoon light began to fade, Daniel helped me wash the baking dishes while the children played in the living room. "Jessica's worried about you," he said quietly, drying a mixing bowl. "Not about the practical stuff. She knows you're more than capable. She's worried about how Mark's behavior is affecting you emotionally." I rinsed a whisk under the faucet, considering my response. "It's been difficult," I admitted. "Mark and I have always had a more formal relationship than Jessica and I, but I never expected this level of calculation." Daniel nodded. "Mark sees the world in terms of transactions, what he can get versus what he has to give. Always has." He paused. "Jessica and I want you to know that our home is always open to you, not because we think you need taking care of, but because we enjoy your company." The simple sincerity of his offer brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Thank you, Daniel. That means more than you know." The visit concluded with promises to have the children over to see my new condo once I was settled, and tight hugs that lingered a moment longer than usual. As their car pulled away from the curb, I felt a renewed determination to navigate this transition with grace, regardless of Mark's behavior. The following week, I received a text message from Mark, the first direct communication since our midnight confrontation. It was brief and formal. "Need to discuss important family matters. Dinner at our house, Friday, 7 p.m. No request, no acknowledgement of our previous interaction, just a summons." My first instinct was to decline, to insist on more respectful communication. But curiosity won out. What important family matters required discussion now? I confirmed my attendance and spent the intervening days preparing for my upcoming move. The house was nearly emptied, with most of my belongings either sold, donated, or packed for transfer to the condo. The bare rooms echoed with memories, but rather than melancholy, I felt a growing excitement about my new space. Linda had connected me with several potential consulting clients, and my calendar was filling with meetings and projects that interested me. Life was moving forward, despite Mark's disapproval. Friday evening arrived, and I drove to Mark and Vanessa's house with a sense of cautious optimism. Perhaps the important family matters involved reconciliation, a recognition that his behavior had been inappropriate. Maybe Vanessa had encouraged him to mend fences before my move. Those hopes evaporated the moment I entered their home. The dining table was set formally, but only for 3, no children in sight. Mark and Vanessa sat waiting, their expressions serious, a folder placed prominently between them. "Mom," Mark nodded stiffly as I took my seat. "Thanks for coming." "Where are Emma and Tyler?" I asked, noticing the unusual quiet of the house. "At a friend's house," Vanessa replied. "This conversation isn't appropriate for children." My anxiety ratcheted up several notches. "What conversation is that exactly?" Mark cleared his throat, adopting what I recognized as his professional demeanor, the one he used with clients and colleagues. "We've been consulting with our financial advisor about your situation, and we have some concerns." "My situation?" I echoed, feeling a sense of déjà vu from our previous discussions. "Your insurance policy," Mark clarified. "The one Dad left." "You." I frowned. "That's not up for discussion, Mark. It's my private financial matter." "It's a family matter," Vanessa countered, "especially when decisions about that money affect the entire family." "How exactly does my insurance policy affect you?" I asked, my voice deliberately calm. Mark opened the folder between them, revealing what appeared to be printouts of investment scenarios and retirement projections. "We've analyzed the numbers, and we're concerned about your long-term financial security." The absurdity of this statement, coming from my son who had only learned about my financial situation weeks ago, would have been comical under different circumstances. "According to our calculations," he continued, "even $3 million won't provide adequate coverage for potential long-term care needs, especially considering inflation and the rising cost of medical care." "I appreciate your concern," I said carefully, "but I've reviewed my financial situation with both Raymond and my financial advisor. We believe I'm well positioned for retirement." Raymond is Dad's old friend, not a sophisticated financial planner, Mark dismissed. "And whatever advisor you're using probably hasn't done this level of analysis." He turned one of the printouts toward me, pointing to a graph with dramatically declining projections. "See this? This shows your potential financial trajectory if you purchase the downtown condo, maintain your current spending habits, and face even moderate medical issues." The projections were absurdly pessimistic, assuming exorbitant spending, minimal investment returns, and catastrophic health problems all occurring simultaneously. "These calculations are based on what assumptions exactly?" I asked. Mark looked momentarily flustered. "Industry standard projections, adjusted for your specific circumstances." "And what circumstances are those? Your age? Your health history?" "Your spending patterns," Vanessa interjected. "We've been observing how you manage money for years, Maggie." The statement was so invasive, so presumptuous, that for a moment I couldn't respond. "You've been observing my spending patterns?" I finally managed. "Mom, someone had to be paying attention," Mark said with exaggerated patience. "You've always been somewhat impulsive with money." This characterization was so contrary to reality. I'd always been the more cautious financial manager in my marriage, building our savings while Richard made bolder investments, that I almost laughed. "Mark, this is inappropriate," I said, firmly. "My financial management is not your concern, and these projections are based on assumptions that have no basis in reality." "We're trying to help you," Vanessa insisted, her tone suggesting I was being unreasonable. "We've developed a comprehensive plan that would protect your assets while ensuring you're properly cared for." "Let me guess," I said dryly. "This plan involves me selling my insurance policy or placing it in a family trust that you would manage." Mark's expression confirmed my suspicion. It would be the most sensible approach. Dad always trusted my financial judgment. He would want me, to look after these assets. The invocation of Richard's wishes, distorted to serve Mark's narrative, was the final straw. "Your father trusted me with those assets," I said, my voice steady despite my growing anger. "He left the policy directly to me, with no conditions or oversight, because he believed in my capability to manage my own affairs." "That was before you lost your job," Mark countered. "Before you started making emotionally driven decisions about selling your home and moving downtown." "Those decisions weren't emotional. They were practical, and they were mine to make." Mark's expression hardened. "This isn't just about you, Mom. That money represents Dad's legacy, the financial future of this family, college funds for Emma and Tyler, investment capital for potential family businesses." And there it was, the real motivation behind their concern. They saw Richard's insurance policy not as protection for his wife, but as a family inheritance they were entitled to control. "Richard left me that money to secure my future," I said, quietly. "Not as a family slush fund for your investment ideas." Vanessa's face flushed with indignation. "How selfish can you be? After everything we've offered you, a home with us, daily support, inclusion in family life, you're hoarding resources that could benefit your grandchildren." "I've already established education trusts for Emma and Tyler," I revealed, tired of the manipulation. "Set up last week with Raymond's help. They'll have funds for college and graduate school if they choose that path, regardless of what happens to me or my relationship with you." This announcement landed like a bomb at the table. Mark and Vanessa exchanged startled glances. "You? What?" Mark finally sputtered. "Without consulting us?" "They're my grandchildren, and it's my money," I replied simply. "The trusts are structured so the funds can only be used for educational expenses. Raymond and Jessica are the trustees." "Jessica?" Vanessa nearly spat the name. "Why would you make her a trustee instead of us, their parents?" I met her gaze steadily. "Because I trust Jessica to honor my wishes without attempting to redirect the funds for other purposes." The implication hung in the air between us. Mark stood abruptly, his chair scraping harshly against the hardwood floor. "This is unacceptable," he declared. "You're dividing the family, turning Jessica against us, making unilateral decisions that affect our children's futures." "I'm securing my grandchildren's education," I corrected. "And any division in this family began when you started seeing me as a resource to be managed, rather than your mother to be respected." "Respected?" Mark's voice rose. "You've shown zero respect for us. We offered you a home, restructured our lives to accommodate you, and you rejected it all to pursue some self-indulgent urban lifestyle." The conversation was deteriorating rapidly, moving further from any possibility of resolution. "I think I should go," I said, standing. "This discussion isn't productive." "Running away won't solve this, Mom," Mark said, his voice cold. "We're talking about the financial future of this family." "No, Mark. We're talking about your attempt to control my finances because you see them as your inheritance rather than my security." I moved toward the door, then paused. "I love you, and I love Emma and Tyler more than anything, but I won't sacrifice my independence to satisfy your expectations about how I should age or how my money should be spent." Vanessa followed me to the door, her final words cutting. "When you're alone in that condo, when you need help with medical appointments or household tasks, don't come running to us. You've made your choice." I walked to my car with a strange sense of calm. The evening had confirmed what I'd suspected. There would be no easy resolution, no return to our previous relationship as long as Mark and Vanessa viewed me through the lens of financial opportunity rather than family connection. The following morning, as I supervised the moving company loading the last of my belongings onto their truck, my phone rang. It was Jessica. "Mark called," she said without preamble. "He's furious about the education trusts." "I imagine he is," I sighed, watching the movers carefully wrapping a painting Richard had given me on our 20th anniversary. I told them last night. He says you've betrayed the family, that you're trying to turn me against him. Jessica's tone made it clear how ridiculous she found this accusation. Are you upset about the trusts? I asked. I should have discussed them with you before making you a trustee. Of course I'm not upset, Jessica assured me. I'm honored you trust me that way. I'm just worried about how ugly this is getting. Mark's saying things. Making threats. My breath caught. What kind of threats? Jessica hesitated. Legal threats, mostly. Talking about challenging your competency, questioning your financial decisions. The suggestion was so outrageous, it momentarily stunned me. Challenge my competency? Based on what? My decision to live independently with more than adequate financial resources? He won't get anywhere with that, I said, trying to reassure both Jessica and myself. I'm of sound mind, managing my own affairs successfully. No, court would entertain such a challenge. I know that, Jessica said quickly, and I don't think he'll actually do anything. He's just lashing out because he's not getting his way. But Mom, she paused, maybe you should talk to a lawyer, just to protect yourself. Her suggestion echoed Raymond's advice from the previous week. As much as I hated the idea of needing legal protection from my own son, recent events suggested it might be prudent. I'll call Raymond, I promised. He can recommend someone. After we hung up, I stood in my nearly empty house, the spaces that had contained my life for years now bare and echoing. Despite the family turmoil, I felt a sense of anticipation about the next chapter. My new condo awaited, my consulting. Projects were lined up, and I'd already joined a downtown photography club that met weekly in the Pearl District. The movers finished loading the truck, and I did a final walkthrough of the house, checking closets and cabinets for anything left behind. In Emma's favorite guest room, I found a small stuffed rabbit wedged behind the radiator, a toy she'd been searching for during her last sleepover. I tucked it into my purse, planning to give it to her when I next saw her, whenever that might. As I locked the front door for the final time, a car pulled into the driveway. For a hopeful moment, I thought it might be Mark, coming to apologize or at least reach some kind of truce before I left. Instead, Linda stepped out, carrying a small potted plant. Housewarming gift, she explained, handing me the plant, jade cutting from the one I'd nurtured in my office for years. Thought you might want a familiar friend in your new place. The thoughtful gesture brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Thank you, I managed, carefully placing the small pot in my car. Linda looked at the house behind me, then back at my face. How are you really doing with all this? The move? The family situation? I considered the question seriously. It's not how I expected this chapter to unfold, I admitted, but I'm surprised by how ready I feel for something new. Linda nodded. You always were adaptable. It's what made you such a good marketing executive. You could see the potential in change when others only saw disruption. We stood in the driveway a moment longer, Linda asking practical questions about the condo, offering to help me unpack that afternoon. Her straightforward friendship was a balm after the complexity of family interactions, and I accepted her offer gratefully. The drive downtown marked a physical transition from one life to another. As the suburban landscape gave way to the denser urban environment, I felt a weight lifting. The condo building stood tall and modern among the converted warehouses of the Pearl District, its lobby bright with natural light from floor-to-ceiling windows. The concierge greeted me by name. We'd met during my initial visits, and helped direct the movers to the service elevator. My unit was on the 8th floor, facing east toward Mount Hood, which was visible on clear days. The space was smaller than my house but felt perfect for my needs. Open-concept living and dining areas, a compact but well-designed kitchen, 2 bedrooms, one for me, one for guests or a home office, and a balcony large enough for container gardening. The walls were currently bare, the space undefined, but I could already envision how it would transform with my belongings, how it would become mine. The movers worked efficiently, placing furniture according to my directions, stacking boxes in approximate locations. Linda arrived as they were finishing, bringing lunch from a nearby deli and immediately diving into helping me unpack kitchen essentials. "The light in here is incredible," she observed, arranging glasses in a cabinet. "Perfect for your photography." That was one of the selling points, I agreed, unwrapping plates from their protective coverings. That and the building's amenities: gym, community room, rooftop garden. "Speaking of community," Linda said casually, "a friend of mine lives 2 floors down. Frank Murphy, retired architect. Fascinating guy, recently widowed. I told him I'd introduce you once you're settled." I shot her a suspicious look. "Are you matchmaking, Linda?" She grinned, unrepentant. "Not matchmaking. Necessarily, just facilitating potential friendships. Frank knows everyone in this building and half the neighborhood. He could help you get connected socially." The idea of new social connections was appealing, though I wasn't sure I was ready for anything beyond friendship. Richard had been gone 7 years, and while I'd gone on occasional dates in the past few years, none had developed into significant relationships. "I'd be happy to meet him," I said carefully. "As a neighbor." Linda's smile widened. "Of course, just as a neighbor." We spent the rest of the afternoon unpacking essential items, arranging furniture, and transforming the blank space into something that felt increasingly like home. By evening, when Linda left with promises to return the next day, the condo had begun to take shape around me. I'd hung a few favorite paintings, arranged family photos on shelves, and made up my bed, with familiar linens. Standing on my balcony as twilight settled over Portland, I could see lights flickering on across the city, each representing other lives, other stories unfolding in parallel to mine. The thought was comforting somehow. I was beginning a new chapter, but I wasn't alone in navigating change. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "How's the new place? Send pictures." I snapped a few photos of the partially arranged rooms and sent them, adding, "Still a work in progress, but already feels like home." Her response came quickly. "It looks perfect for you. Can't wait to bring the kids to see it." Kids, my grandchildren. The most painful aspect of the rift with Mark was how it might affect my relationship with Emma and Tyler. I'd been a consistent presence in their lives since birth, and the thought of that connection becoming supervised or limited cut deep. As if sensing my thoughts, another text from Jessica arrived. "Don't worry about E&T. We'll make sure you see them regularly, whatever Mark says." Her support was reassuring, but I knew the reality might be complicated. Mark and Vanessa controlled access to their children, and if they chose to restrict my time with Emma and Tyler, Jessica's good intentions might not be enough to overcome that barrier. I sent a quick thank you to Jessica and went back inside, closing the balcony door against the November chill. The condo was quiet, the new space amplifying the absence of familiar household sounds. I unpacked a few more boxes, arranged books on shelves, and finally settled on the couch with a glass of wine, too tired to continue but not quite ready for sleep. In the stillness, I allowed myself to really feel the events of the past weeks. The shock of job loss, the unexpected tension with Mark, the revelation of his true priorities, the sadness of leaving my longtime home alongside the excitement of this new beginning. The emotions washed through me like waves, sometimes contradictory, but all part of this transition. My phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. "Ms. Davis, this is Frank Murphy from the 6th floor. Linda mentioned you'd moved in today. Welcome to the Palisades. If you need any neighborhood recommendations or help navigating building services, I'm happy to assist. No obligation to respond. Just wanted to extend a neighborly welcome." The message brought a smile to my face. Linda worked quickly. I saved the number in my contacts and typed a brief response. "Thank you for the welcome, Frank. still finding my way through unpacked boxes, but would appreciate local recommendations once I'm settled. Perhaps coffee next week? His reply came moments later. Coffee sounds perfect. The rooftop garden is lovely in the morning if weather permits, or there's an excellent cafe just around the corner. Let me know what day works for you. I suggested Tuesday, he confirmed, and just like that, I had my first social engagement in my new neighborhood. It was a small thing, but it represented possibility, new connections, new routines, new aspects of myself to discover in this unfamiliar environment. That night, sleeping in my new bedroom for the first time, I dreamed of Richard. We were walking together through a house I didn't recognize, rooms shifting and changing as we moved through them. "You've done well," Dream Richard told me, his hand warm in mine. "This place suits you." I woke with tears on my cheeks, but a sense of peace in my heart. Whether the dream was my subconscious processing change or something more mystical, it felt like a benediction. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and took a moment to orient myself. The condo, my new home. I made coffee in my newly arranged kitchen and carried it to the balcony, watching the city wake up around me. Mount Hood was visible in the distance, its snow-capped peak glowing pink in the early light. The sight was majestic, a reminder of perspective, my personal challenges small against the backdrop of that ancient mountain. After breakfast, I continued, unpacking, finding homes for treasured objects, arranging furniture until the space felt balanced and harmonious. Linda arrived mid-morning as promised, bringing fresh pastries from a nearby bakery and diving back into helping me organize. "How was your first night?" she asked, hanging clothes in the guest room closet. "Surprisingly peaceful," I admitted. "I thought I might feel disoriented, but instead I just felt ready." Linda nodded approvingly. "That's because this move isn't running away from something. It's moving toward something. There's a difference." Her observation resonated. Despite Mark's accusations that I was abandoning family, the truth was that I was embracing a new phase of life, one that honored my continuing capabilities and interests rather than conforming to limiting expectations about aging. We worked steadily through the morning, breaking for lunch on the balcony, where Linda pointed out neighborhood landmarks, the best grocery store, the library branch, the community garden where residents could claim small plots. "The building has a pretty active social calendar too," she mentioned. "Monthly mixers in the community room, book clubs, even cooking classes sometimes. Good way to meet people." "I've never lived in a building with organized social activities," I mused. "It's like college dorm life for grown-ups." Linda laughed. "Exactly, but with better wine and no final exams." As afternoon faded toward evening, the condo had transformed from a collection of boxes and furniture into a cohesive living space. Still new, still lacking some of the lived-in comfort of my previous home, but distinctly mine. Linda departed, with promises to check in tomorrow, leaving me to enjoy my first full evening in the new space. I was heating soup for a simple dinner when my phone rang. Mark's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the answer button, preparing myself for another confrontation. Finally, I accepted the call. "Hello, Mark?" "Mom." His voice sounded strained, formal. "I wanted to let you know that Emma has a school presentation next Friday. She's asked if you would come." The invitation surprised me. "Of course I'll come." "What time?" 2:00. It's at Westside Elementary." He paused. "She's doing a project on family traditions. She wants to talk about the holiday cookie baking you do with her." The fact that my granddaughter had chosen our shared tradition for her school presentation warmed my heart. "I'm honored. Please tell her I'll be there." Another pause. "Mom, about last night." I waited, hoping for an apology, or at least an acknowledgement that his behavior had been inappropriate. I still think you're making a mistake with the financial arrangements, he said instead. But I don't want this situation to affect the children's relationship with you. It wasn't an apology, but it was a concession of sorts. A recognition that whatever our differences, the children's well-being mattered most. I appreciate that, Mark. I don't want our disagreement to affect them either. That doesn't mean... I agree with your decisions, he added quickly. I still think the trust should be managed differently, and I have serious concerns about your financial planning. I suppressed a sigh. Noted, but those are my decisions to make. For now, he said, a subtle threat lurking beneath the words. We'll see you Friday at the school. After he hung up, I stood in my new kitchen, processing the conversation. Mark was still clearly angry, still convinced he should have control over my finances, but he was unwilling to use the children as pawns in our disagreement, at least not directly. That was something. I turned back to my soup, adding herbs from the small indoor garden I'd set up on the kitchen windowsill. Outside, the city lights twinkled against the darkening sky, a constellation of other lives surrounding mine. Tomorrow I would continue settling in, arranging artwork, perhaps explore the neighborhood a bit. Next week I'd meet Frank for coffee, have lunch with Linda to discuss a potential consulting project, and attend Emma's school presentation. Life was continuing to unfold, different than I had expected, but full of possibility nonetheless. Whatever. Challenges lay ahead with Mark. Whatever adjustment this new chapter required, I was facing it on my own terms, in my own space, with the security Richard had ensured and the independence I had earned. Emma's presentation was scheduled for 2 p.m., but I arrived at Westside Elementary half an hour early. The school was a cheerful brick building with colorful murals decorating the entrance, children's artwork displayed prominently in the windows. I signed in at the front office, received a visitor's badge, and followed the administrative assistant's directions to Ms. Thornton's third-grade classroom. The hallways bustled with the controlled chaos of elementary school, teachers shepherding lines of small children, classroom doors decorated with seasonal themes, the mingled scents of disinfectant and art supplies. It reminded me of Jessica's school days, the countless parent-teacher conferences, science fairs, and holiday performances that had punctuated those years. Mark had been less involved in school activities, even then prioritizing career advancement over family events. I paused outside Miss Thornton's classroom, gathering myself. This would be my first time seeing Mark and Vanessa since our confrontation, a week ago. Whatever tension existed between us, I was determined not to let it affect Emma's special day. Parents were already filtering into the classroom, taking seats in child-sized chairs awkwardly arranged in rows. I spotted Mark and Vanessa near the front, heads bent together in conversation. Neither looked up as I entered, though I knew they must have noticed me. I chose a seat toward the back, wanting to give Emma clear sight of me without creating an uncomfortable proximity to her parents. Ms. Thornton, a young woman with an enthusiastic smile and paint-speckled hands, welcomed everyone and explained the format of the presentations. Each child would speak for 3 to 5 minutes about a family tradition they had researched, explaining its origins and significance. These presentations represent weeks of work, she emphasized. The children have conducted family interviews, created visual aids, and practiced their public speaking skills. We're so excited to share their hard work with you today. One by one, children stood before their classmates and families, sharing traditions that ranged from annual camping trips to holiday cooking rituals, some speaking confidently, others barely audible with nervousness. Parents beamed with pride, recording videos on their phones, offering encouraging smiles when young voices faltered. Emma was the 11th presenter. When Ms. Thornton called her name, she walked to the front of the room with deliberate steps. Her spine straight, chin held high, a posture that reminded me powerfully of Richard. She wore the special dress she'd chosen for her birthday 2 months earlier, navy blue with white polka dots, and had tied her hair back with a coordinating ribbon. "My name is Emma Wilson," she began, her voice clear and steady. My family tradition is holiday cookie baking with my grandmother. She turned to display a poster board covered with photographs. Emma and me in my kitchen, flour on our cheeks, standing amid cooling racks of cookies. Close-ups of our specialized cookie cutters. Images of completed cookies arranged on the vintage platters I'd inherited from my own grandmother. Every December, my grandma and I spend a whole weekend making special cookies from recipes that have been in our family for generations, Emma continued. Some of the recipes came from Germany with my great-great-grandmother in 1903. My eyes misted as she described our tradition in detail, how we always started with the sugar cookies because the dough needed to chill, how we had special rolling pins with patterns carved into them, how we sang Christmas carols while the cookies baked. She had absorbed every detail, recognized the significance of each element. The most important cookie is called a Lebkuchen. Emma pronounced the German word carefully. It's a spice cookie that my grandma says tastes like Christmas. The recipe is written in my great-great-grandmother's handwriting, and it's so old that some of the measurements are different from what we use today. She held up a laminated copy of the recipe card, yellowed with age, covered in faded script. I had given her the photocopy for her project, keeping the original safely preserved in my recipe box. Seeing it displayed here, recognized as the family treasure it was, filled me with unexpected emotion. My grandma says that when we bake these cookies, we're connecting with all the women in our family who came before us, Emma said, her voice taking on a solemn quality. She says recipes are like time machines that let us touch hands with people who lived long ago. I had said those exact words to her last Christmas, never imagining she had internalized them so completely. Across the room, I noticed Mark's expression shift, something unreadable passing across his face as he listened to his daughter. The best part of our tradition isn't eating the cookies, though they're delicious, Emma continued with a small smile. The best part is that we do it together, just my grandma and me. When I'm in her kitchen, I feel like I'm part of something bigger than just myself. I'm part of a chain of people who loved each other and passed down their knowledge. She concluded by distributing small samples of Lebkuchen that I had baked the previous evening and delivered to Ms. Thornton before school, a surprise I had coordinated with the teacher to support Emma's presentation. As her classmates and their parents tasted the spiced cookies, Emma found me in the audience and beamed, her face alight with pride and accomplishment. The remaining presentations passed in a blur as I sat processing Emma's words, touched by how deeply she valued our time together. When the event concluded, children reunited with their families amid a chorus of congratulations and proud exclamations. Emma ran directly to me, wrapping her arms around my waist. "Did you like it, Grandma? Did I remember everything right?" I hugged her close, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and the faint trace of school cafeteria. "You were absolutely perfect, sweetheart. I couldn't be prouder." "Dad recorded it so we can watch it again at home," she said excitedly. "And Ms. Thornton said my poster was one of the best in the class." Mark and Vanessa approached, their expressions carefully neutral. Vanessa held Emma's backpack and jacket, while Mark pocketed his phone after recording the presentation. "That was well done, Emma," Mark said, his tone formal but genuine. "Very poised." "Thanks, Dad," Emma beamed, still half embracing me. "Grandma, are you coming back to our house now? Dad said you might." I glanced at Mark, surprised. This was the first I'd heard of any invitation to their home. He cleared his throat. "We thought you might want to celebrate Emma's presentation with a small family dinner, if you're available." The invitation was stiff, clearly not entirely voluntary, but it represented an olive branch of sorts. For Emma's sake, I decided to accept. "I'd love to," I told her, tucking a stray hair behind her ear. "I want to hear all about how you prepared your presentation." Emma cheered, then dashed off to say goodbye to her friends, leaving me alone with Mark and Vanessa in the crowded classroom. "That's very kind of you to include me," I said carefully. Vanessa's smile was tight. Emma insisted. "She's been talking about your cookie tradition all week." There was an accusatory undercurrent to her words, as though I had somehow manipulated Emma's choice of presentation topic. Before I could respond, Mark interjected. "We'll see you at the house then. Around 6? I nodded, and they turned away to collect Emma, effectively ending the conversation. As I watched them leave, Emma chattering excitedly between them, I felt a complicated mixture of emotions: pride in my granddaughter's accomplishment, gratitude for this small opening to reconnect with Mark's family, apprehension about the evening ahead. Rather than drive directly to their house, I returned to my condo to change clothes and gather my thoughts. The space was now fully arranged, my belongings finding their places, the walls adorned with artwork that had special meaning. Living here for the past week had confirmed that I'd made the right decision. The building's amenities made daily life easier, and the central location meant I could walk to restaurants, shops, and cultural events. I had already established small rituals that gave structure to my days: morning coffee on the balcony watching the sunrise behind Mount Hood, afternoon walks along the riverfront, evening reading in the comfortable window seat I'd created in the living room. The rhythm was different from my previous life, but satisfying in new ways. As promised, I had met Frank Murphy for coffee on the rooftop garden. He was a thoughtful, soft-spoken man with a quick wit and encyclopedic knowledge of Portland architecture. Our conversation had ranged from building design to jazz music to travel destinations, flowing easily without awkward pauses. We had parted with plans to attend a photography exhibit at the Portland Art Museum the following weekend. Not quite a date, but definitely the beginning of a friendship. Linda's consulting connection had also proven fruitful. The Weston project was now officially mine, with a contract signed and the first meeting scheduled for Monday. The work would be challenging, but on my terms: no office politics, no demanding corporate hours, just the pure satisfaction of strategic problem-solving. As I changed into a casual but elegant outfit for dinner at Mark's, I reflected on how much had shifted in just a few weeks. The shock of job loss had transformed into an unexpected opportunity to redefine my life. Whatever tensions existed with Mark, I was determined to navigate them with grace while maintaining the boundaries I'd established. I arrived at Mark and Vanessa's house precisely at 6, bearing a small gift for Emma, a children's cookbook featuring international cookie recipes with a note promising we would try some together. Tyler opened the door, his face lighting up when he saw me. "Grandma, did you see Emma's presentation? She practiced it 1,000,000 times, and Dad said she was the best one." I stepped inside, embracing him. "I did see it, and she was wonderful. How are you doing, buddy? How's the chess tournament going?" Tyler launched into an enthusiastic account of his latest chess victories as he led me into the kitchen, where Emma was setting the table while Vanessa prepared dinner. The scene appeared deceptively normal, a family evening like countless others, before our relationship had fractured. "Margaret," Vanessa acknowledged me with a nod, her tone neither warm nor openly hostile. "Emma, please get the water glasses." Emma hugged me quickly before returning to her task, proudly showing me how she had folded the napkins into fancy shapes she'd learned from a YouTube video. Tyler continued his chess narrative, barely pausing for breath, while Vanessa moved efficiently around the kitchen, checking the oven, stirring something on the stove. Mark entered from his home office, tablet in hand, still reviewing work documents. He looked up, noticing me. "Mom, glad you could make it." His greeting was perfunctory, but not unkind. "Kids, wash up for dinner, please." The children scampered off to the bathroom, leaving the adults in an awkward silence. I offered to help with final dinner preparations, which Vanessa declined with a tight smile, suggesting I take a seat at the table instead. Mark poured wine without asking if I wanted any, setting a glass at my place before taking his own seat. When the children returned, dinner proceeded with surprising smoothness, the conversation dominated by Emma's excitement about her successful presentation and Tyler's upcoming science project on solar energy. Mark and Vanessa spoke directly to me only when necessary, addressing most of their comments to the children, but the atmosphere remained civil. It was during dessert, store-bought pie that Vanessa served with unnecessary commentary about her busy schedule leaving no time for homemade baking, that Mark finally addressed our situation. "Emma," he said, setting down his fork, "why don't you and Tyler go play in the game room for a while? The adults need to talk." The children knew better than to argue with that tone. They excused themselves reluctantly, Emma casting a worried glance my way as they left the dining room. When their footsteps had receded up the stairs, Mark turned to me. "Let's be clear about something," he began, his voice low but intense. "This dinner doesn't mean we've resolved our differences. We're doing this for Emma's sake." I nodded, maintaining my composure. "I understand, and I appreciate you including me in celebrating her achievement." "Emma's presentation today," Vanessa interjected, "made it obvious how attached she is to you. We're concerned about how your choices might affect her emotionally." "My choice to live independently?" I clarified. "I don't see how that would negatively impact Emma. I'm still very much present in her life. Or I want to be." Mark's expression remained guarded. "When you rejected our offer to live here, you chose distance over family closeness. Emma doesn't understand that." "I didn't choose distance, Mark. I chose an appropriate living arrangement for myself while remaining actively involved with my grandchildren." "The point is," Vanessa continued as if I hadn't spoken, "the children need stability and consistent expectations. If you're going to remain part of their lives, we need certain assurances." The conversation was taking an unexpected turn. "What kind of assurances?" Mark leaned forward. "First, we need to know you won't undermine our parenting decisions. No more secret trusts set up without our input. No special privileges or excessive gifts." "The education trusts are hardly excessive," I countered calmly. "They're simply ensuring the children have resources for college, something I thought we all wanted." "It's not about the trusts themselves," Mark insisted. "It's about you making unilateral decisions regarding our children's futures." I took a careful sip of water, considering my response. "I understand your concern, and I should have discussed the trusts with you beforehand. That was an oversight on my part. But they're established now, and they'll provide Emma and Tyler with valuable opportunities later in life." Vanessa's mouth tightened. "The second issue is more immediate. If you want regular access to the children, we need a consistent schedule, designated visiting times that don't interfere with their activities or our family plans." The phrasing, "access to the children, designated visiting times," sounded disturbingly like divorce proceedings, as though I were a non-custodial parent rather than their grandmother. "That seems unnecessarily formal," I said carefully. "I've always been flexible about seeing the children when it works for everyone's schedule." "Things are different now," Mark stated flatly. "You've chosen a separate life. That requires more structure." I recognized the underlying message. This was punishment for my independence, a way to exert control where they still could. But fighting would only hurt Emma and Tyler. "What kind of schedule did you have in mind?" I asked, maintaining a neutral tone. Mark outlined their proposal. I could see the children one weekend afternoon each month, plus attendance at significant school events and holiday gatherings. Phone calls would be limited to once a week, scheduled in advance. Any gifts beyond birthdays and Christmas would require prior approval. The restrictions were far more severe than I had anticipated. One afternoon per month? When I had previously seen my grandchildren at least weekly, the proposal was designed to minimize my influence while maintaining the appearance of family inclusion. "That's a significant reduction in my time with Emma and Tyler," I observed quietly. "May I ask why you feel that's necessary?" "We're busy with activities and family commitments," Vanessa explained smoothly. The children are at ages where their social and academic schedules are becoming more demanding. We're simply being realistic about available time." It was a practiced response that avoided the real issue. They were using the children as leverage, a way to express their displeasure with my financial decisions. "I understand schedules can be complicated," I acknowledged, "but I've always worked around your plans, never interfered with activities or appointments. One afternoon a month seems unnecessarily limited." Mark's expression hardened. "It's not negotiable, Mom. These are our children, and these are our terms." The bluntness of his statement hung in the air between us. I could feel my heart pounding, but I kept my expression neutral, unwilling to give them the satisfaction of seeing how deeply their ultimatum had wounded me. "I see," I said finally. "May I have some time to consider this?" "There's nothing to consider," Vanessa replied, her voice cool. "Either you agree to our boundaries, or we'll need to reevaluate your involvement with the children altogether." The threat was explicit now: comply or lose access to my grandchildren. The cruelty of using Emma and Tyler as pawns in this power struggle struck me anew. These were the same people who had forgotten their children entirely during a night of drinking, who had left them waiting and worried without so much as a text message. Now they positioned themselves as gatekeepers of proper grandparent-grandchild relationships. I took a deep breath, fighting to maintain my composure. "I've always respected your role as parents, and I've never intentionally undermined your authority. I love Emma and Tyler deeply, and I want to remain a positive presence in their lives." "Then you'll agree to our terms," Mark stated, not quite a question. What choice did I have? To refuse would potentially cut me off from my grandchildren. Entirely. To agree would subject me to arbitrary restrictions designed to diminish my relationship with them. Neither option seemed tolerable. "Before I answer," I said carefully, "I'd like to suggest a compromise. What if we start with 2 afternoons a month, plus school events and holidays? That would still provide the structure you're seeking while allowing for a more meaningful connection than just a few hours monthly." Mark and Vanessa exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Finally, Mark nodded slightly. 2 afternoons a month, to be scheduled at least 2 weeks in advance, he conceded, and the rest of the terms remain as stated. It was still far less than what I wanted, but it was an improvement over their initial offer. "I can agree to that," I said quietly. "Good," Vanessa stood, beginning to clear the dessert plates. "The children can come to your condo this Sunday from 2 to 5. I'll text you to confirm." The dismissal was clear. I rose from the table, thanking them politely for dinner, my heart heavy with the knowledge that my relationship with my grandchildren would now be measured in carefully allocated hours, subject to Mark and Vanessa's approval and oversight. As I prepared to leave, Emma and Tyler thundered back downstairs, dismayed to find me departing so soon. "But we didn't get to show you our new game," Tyler protested. "Or the drawing I did in art class," Emma added, disappointment evident in her voice. I knelt to their level, summoning a smile that didn't reach my heart. "I have to go now, but guess what? You're coming to visit my new place this Sunday. We can play games and you can show me all your artwork then." Their faces brightened immediately. "Your new condo? With the elevator and the rooftop garden?" Emma asked excitedly. "Exactly," I confirmed. "And wait until you see the view from my balcony. On clear days, you can see all the way to Mount Hood." After final hugs and promises of Sunday's visit, I walked to my car, the cool evening air a relief after the tense atmosphere inside. As I drove back downtown, city lights glimmering against the darkening sky, I allowed myself to fully process what had just occurred. My relationship with my grandchildren, once natural and uncomplicated, had been reduced to a formal visitation schedule, a consequence of my refusal to surrender my independence. The injustice burned, but beneath the hurt and anger, a resolve was forming. If I had only limited time with Emma and Tyler, I would ensure that every moment counted. Our relationship wouldn't be diminished by fewer hours together. I would simply make each hour more meaningful, creating memories and connections that would endure despite Mark and Vanessa's restrictions. Back in my condo, I found a text message from Linda. "How did it go at Mark's?" I hesitated, unwilling to burden her with the full, painful details. "Complicated," I replied. "Tell you over coffee tomorrow?" Her response came quickly. "Absolutely. Riverside Roasters, 10 a.m. Hang in there." I spent the evening planning for Sunday's visit, researching child-friendly activities within walking distance of my building, ordering art supplies Emma would enjoy, finding a chess set for Tyler that would challenge his growing skills. If I only had limited time with them, I would make it count. The next morning, coffee with Linda provided the outlet I needed to process the previous evening's events. Seated at our favorite corner table at Riverside Roasters, watching raindrops, trace patterns on the windows, I recounted Mark and Vanessa's visitation schedule and thinly veiled threats. "That's beyond controlling," Linda said, indignation coloring her voice. "It's practically punitive." "It feels that way," I agreed. "They're using the children as leverage because they can't control my financial decisions anymore." Linda stirred her latte thoughtfully. "Have you considered legal options? Grandparents have rights too." The idea had crossed my mind, but the prospect of a legal battle with my own son was almost unbearable. "I'm not there yet," I admitted. It would escalate the conflict significantly, possibly making things worse for Emma and Tyler. For now, I'll work within their parameters while looking for opportunities to improve the situation. "Smart approach," Linda nodded. "And remember, children grow up. Emma and Tyler will eventually form their own opinions about this situation, independent of their parents' narrative." It was a comforting thought that one day, my grandchildren would be old enough to maintain our relationship on their own terms, without Mark and Vanessa's interference. But that day was years away, and in the meantime, I had to navigate these turbulent waters carefully. Our conversation shifted to more pleasant topics: Linda's new consulting project, my upcoming coffee with Frank, a photography exhibit opening at the Portland Art Museum. The normalcy was restorative, a reminder that while one aspect of my life had become painfully complicated, other areas were flourishing. After coffee, I wandered through a nearby bookstore, selecting novels for my newfound reading time, and a few special books to keep at the condo for Emma and Tyler's visits. The simple act of choosing stories they would enjoy, imagining their reactions to particular characters or plot lines, soothed my wounded spirit. As I browsed, my phone buzzed with a text from Raymond Chen. "Checking in. How are you settling into the new place? Still want me to connect you with that estate attorney?" The reminder of Raymond's legal suggestion gave me pause. While I wasn't ready to pursue grandparent visitation rights, perhaps some protective legal measures would be prudent, given Mark's previous threats about challenging my competency. "Settled in well," I replied. "And yes, attorney connection would be helpful. Precautionary measures only at this point." Raymond's response was immediate. "We'll send contact info today. Smart to be prepared." I completed my shopping and headed back to the condo, the bag of books a pleasant weight against my side. The afternoon stretched before me, empty of obligations but full of possibility. I decided to explore my new neighborhood more thoroughly, walking blocks I hadn't yet discovered, noting restaurants to try, shops to visit, parks where I might bring Emma and Tyler during their limited time with me. The Pearl District hummed with energy, young professionals hurrying between meetings, artists displaying work in small galleries, couples lingering over late lunches at sidewalk cafes. I stopped at a community bulletin board outside a local coffee shop, scanning notices for neighborhood events and groups. A flyer for a downtown literacy program caught my eye. Volunteers needed to read with elementary school children at the public library, one afternoon a week. I snapped a photo of the contact information with my phone. This might be a perfect way to channel my grandmotherly instincts during the long stretches between visits with Emma and Tyler, while making a meaningful contribution to my new community. As I continued walking, my phone rang, Jessica calling for our daily check-in. "How was dinner at Mark's?" she asked after greeting me. "He's been suspiciously quiet about it." I gave her the abbreviated version, mentioning the restricted visitation schedule but downplaying the confrontational aspects. Jessica was protective enough without me adding fuel to the sibling tension. 2 afternoons a month? She sounded incredulous. "That's ridiculous, Mom. You've been more present in those kids' lives than Mark has half the time." "I know," I sighed. "But fighting about it won't help anyone, least of all Emma and Tyler. I'm choosing my battles carefully." "You're being way more mature about this than I would be," Jessica admitted. "But that's why you're the mom and I'm still figuring things out." Her comment made me smile. At 35, Jessica still saw herself as learning life's lessons, while Mark, at 38, believed he had all the answers. The contrast between my children had never been more stark. "How are things with you and Daniel?" I asked, deliberately changing the subject. Jessica's voice brightened immediately. "Actually, we've been talking about something we wanted to run by you." As she explained their tentative plans to try for a baby in the coming year, my heart lightened. The possibility of another grandchild, one whose parents would welcome my involvement without restriction, felt like a balm to my wounded spirit. "That's wonderful news," I told her sincerely. "You and Daniel will be amazing parents." "We're not making any announcements yet," Jessica cautioned. "Just starting to prepare, financially and otherwise. But I wanted you to know we're thinking about it." We chatted a while longer about her teaching job, Daniel's recent promotion, their plans to renovate their kitchen before any baby arrived. The conversation was easy, loving, a sharp contrast to every interaction with Mark. By the time we hung up, I had walked nearly 3 miles through my new neighborhood, discovering hidden courtyards, interesting architectural details, and a small farmer's market setting up for the weekend. The city felt increasingly like home, each exploration adding another layer of familiarity and comfort. Back at my condo, I found an email from Raymond containing contact information for Elizabeth Huang, an estate attorney specializing in elder law. "No reflection on your age," Raymond had written, "but Elizabeth's expertise includes preventing exploitation and protecting autonomy, issues that might be relevant given Mark's attitudes." I saved the information, not quite ready to make the call but appreciating the resource. For now, I would focus on preparing for Sunday's visit with the children and Monday's first meeting with the Weston Project team. Sunday arrived with unexpected sunshine breaking through Portland's typical November clouds. I had spent the previous day preparing for Emma and Tyler's visit, stocking their favorite snacks, setting up an art corner for Emma, ensuring the chess set was prominently displayed for Tyler. I'd even arranged small welcome baskets for each of them, filled with books, games, and small treasures I thought they'd enjoy. At precisely 2 o'clock, the concierge called to announce their arrival. Moments later, the elevator doors opened, and Emma and Tyler burst into the hallway, followed by Vanessa, whose tight expression suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. "Grandma!" Emma rushed toward me, wrapping her arms around my waist. "Your building has a doorman just like in the movies." Tyler was more interested in the elevator. "It has a glass wall so you can see everything as you go up. Can we ride it again before we leave?" I hugged them both, drinking in their excited energy, their familiar sense, the feeling of their small bodies against mine. "Of course we can ride the elevator again, and wait until you see the view from the balcony." Vanessa stood awkwardly at the threshold, making no move to enter. "I'll be back at 5, she said briskly. "Their emergency contacts and allergy information are in this folder." She handed me a manila envelope as though passing classified documents. "Thank you," I said, accepting the folder with more grace than I felt. "We'll have a wonderful afternoon." She bent to give the children perfunctory kisses on their foreheads. "Behave for Grandma. Remember, we have dinner plans tonight, so no excessive sugar." After Vanessa departed, the children explored the condo with unbridled curiosity, exclaiming over the window seat, "It's like a reading throne." The balcony, "I can see the whole world from here," and the small second bedroom I had set up with their interests in mind. "You have your own art studio?" Emma gasped, discovering the easel and art supplies arranged in the corner. "It's our art studio," I corrected gently, "for whenever you visit." Tyler had already discovered the chess set. "This looks different from the one at home," he observed, examining the carved wooden pieces. "It's hand-carved," I explained. "Each piece is unique. Your grandfather bought it in Italy before you were born." The next 3 hours passed in a blur of activity: art projects with Emma, chess games with Tyler, exploring the building's amenities, including the rooftop garden where we had an impromptu picnic with the snacks I'd prepared. The children were full of stories about school, friends, and activities, speaking in the rush of words that comes when you have too much to say and limited time to say it. I absorbed every detail, asking questions, listening attentively, storing memories of their animated faces and enthusiastic gestures. Despite the artificial constraints placed on our time together, the connection between us remained strong and genuine. All too soon, the clock approached 5, and we made our way back to the lobby to await Vanessa's arrival. As promised, we took an extra elevator ride, the children pressing their faces against the glass wall to watch the floor slip by. "Remember to thank your grandmother," Vanessa prompted as she arrived precisely at 5 o'clock, her expression suggesting she was mentally calculating whether I had exceeded my allotted time by even a minute. "Thank you, Grandma." Emma threw her arms around me one last time. "Can we bring our cookie cutters next time and make cookies here?" "Of course." "We can," I promised, smoothing her hair. "I'll make sure I have all the ingredients ready." Tyler offered a more reserved goodbye, having reached the age where public displays of affection were becoming self-consciously monitored, but he still permitted a quick hug. "Thanks for letting me beat you at chess," he whispered with a mischievous grin. "You won fair and square," I assured him. Though we both knew I'd offered minimal resistance to his strategic advances, Vanessa herded them toward the exit with practiced efficiency. "We need to get going. We have dinner reservations at 6. No acknowledgement of whether the children had enjoyed themselves, no questions about our afternoon together, not even the basic courtesy of asking how I was settling into my new home. Just the implicit reminder that their real life, the important life, was continuing elsewhere, and my role was merely a scheduled interlude. After they departed, the condo felt, suddenly, achingly empty. The evidence of the children's presence remained: Emma's watercolor painting drying on the counter, the chess pieces still arranged mid-game, crumbs from our rooftop picnic scattered across the dining table. But the vibrant energy they brought had vanished with them. I moved through the space slowly, tidying without erasing these precious traces of their visit. I carefully set Emma's artwork aside to be framed, left Tyler's chess game intact so we could continue it next time, stored their welcome baskets in the guest room closet ready for their next visit. As twilight settled over Portland, I stood on my balcony, watching city lights flicker on across the urban landscape. The afternoon had confirmed what I already knew. The artificial constraints on our time together couldn't diminish the genuine connection I shared with my grandchildren. Yet the knowledge that 2 more weeks would pass before I saw them again settled like a weight in my chest. My phone chimed with a text message from Jessica. "How did it go with the kids today?" "Wonderful, but too short," I replied honestly. "They loved exploring the building." "I'm sure they did," Jessica responded immediately, followed by, "Daniel and I were thinking of bringing dinner over tomorrow night if you're free. Thai food from that place you like." The offer warmed me. Without explicitly acknowledging it, Jessica was making a point of increasing her presence in my life to counterbalance Mark's restrictions. That sounds perfect, I texted back. Around 6? 2 days before Thanksgiving, I was elbow-deep in pumpkin cheesecake preparations when my phone rang. Mark's name flashed on the screen, sending an immediate wave of anxiety through me. Had they changed their minds about including me for dessert? "Hello, Mark," I answered, trying to keep my voice even. "Mom." His tone was different, hesitant, lacking the cold formality that had characterized our recent interactions. "Do you have a minute to talk?" "Of course," I said, setting aside my mixing bowl and wiping my hands on a kitchen towel. A long pause followed, filled with the sound of his breathing. I need to ask you something." My heart raced. Was this about the mediation letter? Had he received it and was now preparing to cut me off entirely? "What is it?" I prompted, gently, when he didn't continue. "Vanessa's parents arrived yesterday," he began, his voice tight. "They're staying through the weekend." "I see," I said neutrally, waiting for him to continue. "The thing is?" His voice caught slightly. "Dad, her father, had some questions about our financial situation. He wants to meet with our financial advisor tomorrow to discuss some investment opportunities he's been exploring." The pieces clicked into place immediately. Vanessa's parents were doing exactly what Mark and Vanessa had attempted with me, leveraging family relationships to gain financial control. "I see," I repeated, more carefully this time. "And how do you feel about that?" Another long pause. "I don't know. They've helped us financially in the past, but lately Dad's been making comments about our spending habits, questioning my investment choices. He keeps talking about legacy, planning and family wealth management like our money is part of some collective pot he has a say in." The irony was so perfect it was almost painful. Everything Mark had tried to do to me, control my finances, question my decisions, frame independence as family disloyalty, was now being done to him by his in-laws. "That must be uncomfortable," I said, keeping my tone neutral, fighting the urge to point out the parallel. "It is," Mark admitted. "And now he's insisting on meeting our financial advisor, talking about consolidating family resources for maximum efficiency. Vanessa thinks I should just go along with it to keep the peace, but it feels invasive," I finished for him. "Like your financial independence is being questioned." "Exactly." The relief in his voice was palpable. Finally, someone understood. "They're acting like we're incompetent to manage our own money, like we need their oversight." I could have responded with righteous indignation, could have thrown his own behavior back in his face. Instead, I took a deep breath and chose a different path. "It's difficult when family relationships and financial matters become entangled," I said carefully. "It can complicate things in ways that go beyond just money." "Yeah," Mark sounded thoughtful. "I guess it does." A silence stretched between us, filled with unspoken recognition. I waited, giving him space to make the connection himself. "Mom," he finally said, his voice quieter now. "I've been thinking about some things, about how we've handled this situation with you." My heart quickened. "Oh? Emma keeps asking when we're going to make cookies at your house. She doesn't understand why she can only see you twice a month now. And Tyler." He paused. "Tyler asked me why we're being mean to Grandma." The children's perceptions, unfiltered by adult pretense, had apparently cut through the narrative Mark and Vanessa had constructed. Children often see situations more clearly than we give them credit for, I observed. "Yeah," Mark agreed. "They do." Another pause. "I got your letter. About mediation." I held my breath, waiting. "At first, I was angry," he admitted. "I thought you were trying to use legal means to undermine our parental authority, but then I actually read it. And it wasn't what I expected. It wasn't accusatory or demanding. That wasn't my intention, I assured him. I just want to find a way forward that works for everyone, especially Emma and Tyler. I know, he said softly. I think I've known that all along, but… He trailed off. But what, Mark? But when you didn't do what we expected. When you chose independence. Instead of moving in with us, it felt like rejection. And then when we found out about the insurance policy, it felt like you'd been keeping secrets, like you didn't trust us. It was the most honest he'd been since this entire situation began. I chose my words carefully. I never intended it as rejection, Mark. I simply needed to make choices that were right for me at this stage of my life. And the insurance policy was private because your father and I always kept our finances separate from our relationships with you and Jessica. It wasn't about trust. It was about boundaries. Boundaries, he repeated, as if testing the word. That's what I'm struggling with now, where the boundaries should be with Vanessa's parents. I allowed myself a small smile, grateful he couldn't see it through the phone. Setting healthy boundaries can be challenging, especially with family. But they're necessary for relationships to remain respectful and balanced. Mom, would you… He hesitated. Would you be willing to talk about this more? Maybe after Thanksgiving? I think I need some perspective. The request was so unexpected, so contrary to the rigid stance he'd maintained for weeks, that for a moment I couldn't respond. I'd like that very much, I finally said, emotion tightening my throat. Good, he sounded relieved. That's good. A pause. And Mom, about the visitation schedule with the kids. Yes? I think we should revisit that. It's too restrictive. The kids miss you, and this arbitrary limitation isn't helping anyone. Tears pricked at my eyes. I miss them too, every day. I know, he said softly. I know you do. I heard voices in the background. I have to go. Vanessa's dad is calling for me. But we'll talk more at Thanksgiving, okay? Okay, I agreed. I'll see you then. After we hung up, I stood in my kitchen, hands still dusted with graham cracker crumbs from the cheesecake crust, trying to process what had just happened. Mark's perspective had shifted. Not completely, not permanently perhaps, but significantly. And it had happened not because of my arguments or legal pressures, but because he was experiencing firsthand what it felt like to have his financial autonomy questioned by family members who felt entitled to control. Sometimes understanding requires walking in another's shoes, feeling the pinch where they feel it, recognizing the discomfort they've experienced. Mark was finally beginning to understand what he had put me through, not through my explanation, but through his own parallel experience. I returned to my cheesecake preparation with lighter spirits and a cautious hope. The path forward wasn't clear yet, but a door had opened that had seemed firmly closed just hours before. Thanksgiving evening, I arrived at Mark and Vanessa's, home precisely at 7, bearing 3 pumpkin cheesecakes and a carefully wrapped gift for each of the children. Vanessa's mother, a rail-thin woman with perfectly coiffed silver hair and shrewd eyes, answered the door with the practiced smile of someone accustomed to maintaining social appearances. "You must be Margaret," she said, assessing me with a quick up-and-down glance. "I'm Eleanor Henderson. We've heard so much about you." Her tone made me wonder exactly what they'd heard, but I matched her social smile with one of my own. "Lovely to meet you. Thank you for including me this evening." The living room was arranged for post-dinner coffee and dessert, with Vanessa fussing over place settings while her father, a distinguished-looking man with the same calculating eyes as his daughter, held court from the armchair, lecturing Mark about some financial matter. The children, still in their Thanksgiving finery but showing signs of a long day's confinement, brightened immediately when they spotted me. "Grandma!" Emma rushed over, throwing her arms around my waist. "You brought the cheesecakes. Did you think I'd forget?" I hugged her tightly, savoring the moment. Tyler approached more sedately but with equal enthusiasm. Dad said you might teach me that chess move you mentioned last time. Absolutely, I promised. Next time you visit. Mark extricated himself from his father-in-law's monologue to greet me, his expression cautiously warm. Happy Thanksgiving, Mom. Thanks for coming. The subtle emphasis on thanks communicated that he recognized the situation's awkwardness and appreciated my graciousness in accepting the limited invitation. Vanessa's welcome was more perfunctory, her attention clearly divided between hosting duties and monitoring her parents' reaction to my presence. The cheesecakes can go on the sideboard, she directed, barely making eye contact. Dinner had evidently been a formal affair. The dining room still visible through the archway showed a table set with Vanessa's best china, crystal glasses at each place setting, elaborate floral arrangements creating an impressive tablescape. My exclusion from that portion of the celebration stung afresh, but I pushed the feeling aside, focusing instead on the children's excitement about dessert and Mark's subtle signals that our earlier conversation had genuinely shifted something in his perspective. As Vanessa served coffee and I began cutting the cheesecakes, her father, Gordon, addressed me directly for the first time. So, Margaret, Mark tells me you recently sold your home in Lake Oswego. Downsizing for retirement? The question seemed innocent enough, but there was an undertone I recognized immediately, the same probing for financial vulnerabilities that Mark had attempted with me. A change of lifestyle more than downsizing, I replied pleasantly. I wanted a place in the heart of the city, close to cultural amenities and with less maintenance. Sensible approach, Gordon nodded approvingly. Though real estate is generally a better long-term investment than renting. You keep the property in the family, pass it down to the next generation. I purchased rather than rented, I clarified, accepting a coffee cup from Vanessa. A condominium in the Pearl District. Eleanor entered the conversation smoothly. The Pearl is trendy but expensive. Were you comfortable making such a significant investment at your stage of life? The implication was clear. At my age, shouldn't I be conserving resources rather than spending on an urban lifestyle? How familiar this line of questioning felt. The investment aligned well with my financial planning, I said simply. My late husband was very thorough in ensuring my long-term security. Gordon's eyebrows lifted slightly. Always good to have solid planning in place, though in my experience, family-centered financial management offers the greatest stability. Pooling resources, coordinating investments across generations. I caught Mark's eye across the room, saw the flicker of recognition in his expression. This was exactly the conversation he'd described on the phone. His father-in-law probing for openings to insert himself into their financial decision-making. Different approaches work for different families, I offered neutrally. Richard and I always believed in maintaining clear financial boundaries, even within family. Gordon made a dismissive gesture. Boundaries are all well and good, but family resources should be managed holistically. It's about legacy planning, maximizing intergenerational wealth transfer. Dad, Mark interrupted with unusual assertiveness. I don't think Thanksgiving dessert is the right time for financial discussions. Gordon looked momentarily surprised at the interruption, but recovered quickly. Of course, just making conversation. The exchange set the tone for the remainder of the evening, polite surface interactions underlaid with complex dynamics and unspoken tensions. Vanessa's parents clearly viewed family relationships through a lens of financial control and obligation, an approach they had instilled in their daughter and expected Mark to accept without question. I focused my attention on Emma and Tyler, listening to their animated descriptions of school projects and activities, asking questions that drew them out further. Vanessa hovered anxiously, as though concerned I might say something inappropriate, while her parents observed with the detached interest of anthropologists studying an unfamiliar social ritual. As 9 o'clock approached, I began making preparations to leave, thanking my hosts and hugging the children goodbye. Mark walked me to the door, stepping outside briefly as I retrieved my coat. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "It meant a lot to the kids." "I wouldn't have missed it," I assured him. "They're the highlight of any holiday for me." He glanced back toward the house, ensuring we weren't overheard. "I see what you mean now, about boundaries and financial pressure and all of it. Being on the receiving end feels very different than I expected." It was as close to an apology as I was likely to get, but it represented a significant shift in perspective. "It usually does," I acknowledged. "Financial relationships within families are complicated. They easily become entangled with love, obligation, control." "I'd still like to talk more," he said. "After the holiday weekend, when Vanessa's parents have gone home. Maybe we could have lunch, just the two of us?" "I'd like that very much," I said sincerely. His expression softened. "And about the kids visiting. Vanessa and I talked, and we're loosening the restrictions. They can come every weekend if scheduling permits, not just twice a month. And you're welcome to attend their activities. Tyler has a chess tournament next Saturday." The change was more than I had dared hope for so quickly. "Thank you, Mark. That means more than you know." As I drove back to my condo through the rain-slicked streets, holiday lights reflecting in puddles and blurring through my windshield, I felt a tentative optimism I hadn't experienced in weeks. The situation with Mark wasn't resolved. There were still difficult conversations ahead, trust to rebuild, boundaries to establish more clearly. But a door had opened. A glimmer of understanding had dawned. Sometimes, I reflected, the most effective teacher is experience. Mark had needed to feel the discomfort of financial pressure from family to recognize what he had been doing to me. It wasn't a perfect resolution, not yet, but it was a beginning. Back in my condo, I kicked off my shoes and curled into the window seat, watching the city lights shimmer beyond the glass. My phone chimed with a text message from Frank. "Hope your Thanksgiving gathering went well. Still on for the exhibition tomorrow?" I smiled, typing back, "Better than expected." And yes, looking forward to tomorrow. Life was unfolding in unexpected ways. My relationship with Mark beginning to heal, my bond with my grandchildren protected and nurtured despite earlier threats, new friendships forming, professional opportunities emerging, and perhaps even the gentle possibility of romance on the horizon. The insurance policy Richard had so carefully arranged had provided more than financial security. It had given me the freedom to stand my ground, to maintain my independence when pressured to surrender it, to demonstrate to my grandchildren that aging didn't mean relinquishing autonomy or dignity. As December approached with promises of holiday lights, cookie baking with Emma, chess matches with Tyler, and new traditions in my downtown home, I felt profound gratitude for this unexpected chapter of my life. Not the retirement I had planned. Certainly, but perhaps something richer, a life reclaimed on my own terms, relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation, and the quiet knowledge that I had weathered this storm without compromising my essential self. Outside my window, the first snowflakes of the season began to fall, dusting the city with possibilities as fresh and unpredictable as the path that lay before me. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.